This week on the Business of Tech, OpenAI released ChatGPT Plugins for travel, shopping, and dining, offering a glimpse into the future of AI-powered chatbots. We'll also be discussing Datto's new cloud management solution, plus we'll be taking a look at the NLRB General Counsel's clarification on the retroactive application of non-disparagement rulings. We'll dive into Novo's data latest report on the top 10 SaaS providers for small businesses, as well as Capterra's findings on the impact of shadow IT on SMBs. And that's not all. We'll also be taking a look at Dell's new IT managed service for SMBs, Silicon Valley's Bank's recent sale, and Microsoft's introduction of ads to Bing Chat. Finally, we'll be discussing how the tech industry diversity has changed over the years and the potential end of the remote work era. Hit those like, subscribe, and the notification bell, and help us pay the bills. And here are this week's stories. The General Counsel of the National Labor Relations Board issued a clarifying memo on Wednesday regarding the scope of a February ruling by the federal agency's board that said employers cannot include blanket non-disparagement clauses in their severance packages, nor demand laid-off employees keep secret the terms of their exit agreements. In the memo sent to regional offices, General Counsel Jennifer Abruzzo addressed what had been one of the largest questions that resulted from the ruling. Does it retroactively void broad non-disparagement agreements that were signed prior to the February ruling? Abruzzo wrote that the decision does in fact have retroactive application, meaning that already signed and overtly broad non-disparagement clauses are no longer considered valid by the NLRB. Abruzzo is charged with prosecuting cases against employers who break the rules. She said an unlawful clause would likely not invalidate an entire severance agreement, as the regional offices tend to seek to have the unlawful portions voided out as opposed to the entire agreement. This is quoted from Vice. Why do we care? Oversimplifying entirely, if employers don't want employees talking smack, don't be a jerk. It's kinda that simple. Overthink this, and you miss critical insight. Employers generally shouldn't need this rule anyway. If you're worried about this, perhaps take a moment to consider why. In news from Rich Freeman's Channelholic, let me quote this bit. Datto has cloud management coming soon, like very soon. Included in Datto's RMM Roadmap webcast last week was word that the vendor's first cloud management solution is just months away from GA. This is a bigger deal than it might seem, because while ConnectWise demoed a proof of concept cloud management tool at its IT Nation event last November, and CISA, Datto's parent, has been talking about cloud management since at least last June, Enable is currently the only top-tier managed services software vendor with a SaaS management tool in market. As a result, cloud-only companies like Augment, Nerdio, Skykick, and Avix SaaSleo unit, more on them in an upcoming edition of Channelholic, by the way, dominate the space at present. Why do we care? This is catnip for me. Finally, movement on cloud management. Questions I want to know. Are the sleeping giants moving? How do they define cloud, SaaS, or infrastructure? Enable bought a company for their offering, so look for additional releases to judge if it will change. Are they building further? I maintain that this space is a requirement, and this may be the year there are more entrants. In data released from Novo, the 10 most popular SaaS providers for small businesses. Novo analyzed SaaS payment data between January 2022 and February 2023 from more than 70,000 of its financially active, self-employed, and small business customers across industries. The majority of the businesses earned $250,000 or less in annual revenue, had 3 or fewer employees, and were all based in the United States. Through Novo's analysis, the company found that these 10 companies were behind the most popular SaaS apps for small business owners. First, Intuit. Second, Google G Suite. Third, Adobe. Fourth, Shopify. Fifth, Canva. Sixth, Gusto. Seventh, Squarespace. Eighth, Microsoft 365. Ninth, GoDaddy. And 10th, Wix. Why do we care? Let's link the two to the previous story. First, when most providers think about the software their clients are using, I suspect many of these aren't on that list. That's likely a problem. And when I've been critical of SaaS management solutions, it's because they don't move beyond Google and Microsoft management. If the number one solution businesses use is Intuit, why are they never even discussed? That seems like a concern. Here's the other notable thought. How many of these are so-called channel companies? 2 or 3 if we're generous to GoDaddy? This is the top 10 list. Sure, it's super small businesses, but there's a disconnect here to be exploited. OpenAI has announced and released a pilot of plugins for ChatGPT, which allow the chatbot to be extended to accomplish other tasks. The first batch of plugins extends ChatGPT into travel, shopping, dining, math, and other realms by linking the bot to well-known services like Expedia, Instacart, Kayak, Klarna, and OpenTable. The plugins will also allow the bot to browse the web. And it didn't take long for a hacker to find 80 secret plugins that could be revealed by removing certain parameters from the API call. OpenAI already fixed it. A bit more about that bug from last week OpenAI did fix. Some users' payment information may have been exposed. A bug in the open source library called redis.py, REDIS-PY, created a caching issue that may have shown some active users the last 4 digits and expiration date of another user's credit card, along with their first and last name and email and payment address. Users also may have seen snippets of others' chat histories as well. An article in Axios focuses on what generative AI is good at: creative tasks, genre shifting, and experimentation. Gartner analysts from the Gartner Data and Analytics Summit weighed in on if ChatGPT will eliminate jobs. Asked by Megan Romal-Bellissi, Senior Manager of Public Relations at Gartner, who moderated the panel, what impact ChatGPT will have on the human workforce as a whole, the reply that Gartner issued is that predicting that by 2026, upwards of 100 million people, quote, will have what we call a robo-colleague, a synthetic virtual colleague, and will use them. But to answer your direct question, will it replace jobs? We don't think there's going to be this huge replacement of jobs, end quote. But it might open up machine customers. Also from Gartner, by 2025, there will be 15 billion connected products with the potential to behave as customers, also known as machine customers, shopping for services and supplies for themselves and their owners. Why do we care? There's an ecosystem forming quickly, if not already here, around generative AI as integrations become a model to expand reach. And remember the timeline. This is roughly 5 months into the product. Project out. Next should come system integrators delivering this as a service, too. The other reason to care is the impact. I agree this won't be a loss of jobs. But how about a world where robots talk to robots? Simple example, you use an AI to write your email, and the recipient uses AI to summarize the email. Or here, machine customers, machines talking to machines on behalf of the humans behind them. We're in for a wild ride. Are your go-to-cloud providers AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud? Do you ever question whether some clients really need the complexity and expense of the big players? Recommend a better fit with Linode and Akamai, Linux cloud hosting at a fraction of the cost of the big players. Save up to 70% on cloud bills, enjoy flat, transparent pricing, and zero-tier technical support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, regardless of your monthly spend. test Linode for yourself with $250 free cloud credit by visiting linode.com/MSPradio. In the shocking no one department, a report out from Capterra. The 2023 Shadow IT and Project Management Survey offers that 58% of small and mid-sized businesses, or SMBs, have experienced high-impact shadow IT efforts outside the purview of their official IT department. Half of the SMBs say shadow IT teams are most commonly formed because employees lack understanding about the process for acquiring new technology. This is closely followed by 41% of SMBs attributing it to a perception that the IT department is too slow or cumbersome. Another 37% say an incubator team was created with a senior manager's approval, but without the IT team's awareness. SMBs have reported financial and productivity improvements due to shadow IT teams, despite potential short-term negative impacts. 80% say that shadow IT efforts have ultimately contributed to a positive financial impact in the long run. Businesses have also attributed these initiatives to higher productivity. While I'm on this, some Gartner data. They're predicting that within a year, developers outside of IT departments will account for at least 80% of the user base for low-code tools, up from 60% in 2021. Why do we care? Shadow IT happens because of the reasons outlined. Employees don't know how to get the tech they need, or are used to the department of no, or are just disconnected from IT entirely in their business function. As a provider of IT services, focus here. Remove the friction on getting solutions into the hands of users and link them back to the business function. It's simple, yet very powerful. Because what Gartner's analysis misses is that AI will change the way code is generated too, and put more into the user's control. Something I spotted on Channel EDE last Friday. Dell is offering a $70 per seat per month IT managed service to SMBs via the Dell Apex Managed Device Service subscription. The service includes 24/7 service for keeping devices secure and up to date. The per seat cost of $70 is available on a month-to-month basis, and Dell says it includes all elements of hardware management from device setup to software implementation. Why do we care? Well, we shouldn't, which is why I bring it up. If you're in IT services and focused on the productivity layer, you likely don't care much about Dell's move here. If you're worried about it, spend your time refocusing your value so you don't have to care. Let's start with the end of the Silicon Valley Bank story, as the bank was sold. According to the U.S. Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, First Citizens Bank and Trust Company has acquired all the deposits and loans of Silicon Valley Bank. In the hearings this week, Michael Barr, Vice Chair for Supervision at the Federal Reserve, said SVB's failure is a textbook case of mismanagement. I want to highlight this quote from Axios. Quote, FDIC Chair Martin Greenberg stunned with the news that SVB's top 10 depositors had a combined $13.3 billion parked there. That implies it had customers big enough to know better, keeping more than $1 billion in cash at a single mid-sized bank. Markets appear to be cautious but optimistic on the news of the sale. Why do we care? I'm ready to move on from SVB because of the apparent conclusion that the bank made some bad choices and thus why it failed. It's not a systematic problem. There's a lot of noise about regulators here, but I think it's a red herring. The system worked. Those who made the wrong decisions lost all their equity. They walk away with nothing. But the customers were backstopped by the government. I'm putting a bow on this one. I'm adding a new segment to the show here where I review some community sentiment. We've been scouring for nuggets of insight, and we'll be sharing ones I found impactful. This comes from a review of the various online communities that I listen to and share stories with. In a discussion about starting an MSP, the consensus is to avoid restaurants, retail, and bowling alleys. These are low margin opportunities with high turnover, and the work is generally not enjoyable. The community also discussed attacks on YouTubers and how they can be prevented. Security awareness training is suggested to be more effective than antivirus and EDR in preventing these types of attacks. Next-gen AV is also considered an integral part of any security strategy, but you need more than just antivirus. The root cause of the attacks, in case you hadn't been tracking, was session hijacking. Apparently, due to a mistake by Microsoft, some traffic from Google Fiber is being routed through Russia. This affects those with a conditional access policy preventing logging in from outside the US. There's yet to be an official word from Google on this at the time of this story. Why do we care? I'm intrigued by the sentiment that restaurants and retail are low margin, mainly as I know there's an entire association of service providers who focus entirely on retail. My instinct is that this space would also be ripe for standardization, which is a tenet of classic managed services offerings. I posit that it's likely a bit harder of a sector, and thus the pushback, but in complex problems, there lies the higher value. The attacks on YouTubers highlight the fallibility of humans. They're getting in by users clicking on things that appear to be legitimate. Linus Tech Tips was the recent one here, and a salesperson opened a proposal. Sure, it was a zip and not a PDF, but it was a targeted phishing attack. The last story is one I ponder as an example of, is this useful? I want your feedback. What do you want to hear about? What kinds of stories interest you and what don't? Listeners, I'm listening here. So let's look at some reporting on the potential end to the era of remote work. According to a new report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Wall Street Journal recently reported that 72.5% of private sector establishments surveyed from August 1st to September 30th, 2022, had little to no telework. That's a giant leap from 2021, when just 60.1% of establishments surveyed from July to September 2021 reported little to no telework. 11.1% of these establishments had everyone teleworking all the time based on the August to September 2022 data. That's higher than the 10.3% share for July to September 2021. BLS data shows the information sector has a relatively high share of establishments where workers worked all the time remotely at 42.2%. I'll layer in something else. Axios considering the impact of office occupancy on the larger office property market and, by extension, the broader economy. According to TREP, delinquencies on commercial office mortgages hit 2.4% in February, up from 1.5% 6 months ago. Then again, according to a Gallup survey of more than 15,000 American workers, just 32% of people felt engaged in their jobs at the end of 2022, and the number of workers who reported being actively disengaged climbed during the pandemic. Most importantly, just 30% of workers surveyed by Gallup said they had, quote, received recognition or praise for doing good work over the past week. Another survey by the HR software company Human Work found that more than half of the workers they spoke to didn't feel valued by their employer. And this epidemic of neglect is driving employees away. A 2021 study by the global management consulting firm McKinsey found that the top 2 reasons people quit their jobs are because they don't feel valued by their company or manager. New Fishbowl data supports all this. 71% of professionals are uncomfortable discussing mental health with their managers. In technology, 34% of tech professionals specifically would be comfortable talking to their managers about mental health. Why do we care? A listener called me out as wrong on remote work, and I could well be. I think 42% of work done all the time remotely seems like a pretty significant number. 2 things. First, anyone involved in office space itself and related industries should be considering their next moves. And second, I want to highlight the second-order effects happening. Disengagement by employees and an unwillingness to discuss important matters like mental health. Sure, the solution might be pulling everyone back, but I don't think it's that simple, and I would encourage businesses to tackle the more nuanced answers. The Business of Tech podcast updates our diversity report for IT leadership each quarter. Across 300 IT services-focused companies with 3,931 leaders, 89.3% are white this quarter. 20.8% are female. These numbers are nearly identical to those last quarter. And an additional set of data to report on this quarter, we examined the CRN channel chiefs for 2023, which contained 563 humans. In this sample set, roughly 96% are white and 24% are female. Let's tell more of the story here. According to recent research from Infotech Research Group, Black professionals working in the tech industry are less satisfied than their colleagues and often face different barriers. The survey finds that only 23% of Black respondents feel very satisfied in their current role, compared to 34% of all other professionals. Black respondents were 55% more likely than all other professionals to report that they had no career advancement or promotion opportunities. The top 3 barriers to career advancement, according to Black respondents, are microaggressions at 54%, racism 50%, and gender-based bias at 39%. While all other respondents cite the top barriers as gender-based bias 45%, microaggressions 34%, and racism 23%. And according to a recent study, and Bloomberg Law is reporting on this, that corporate diversity roles have been eliminated at a greater rate than other positions as companies seek to lower headcount and costs amid stubbornly high inflation and rumblings of a possible recession. The relative representation of women in technical roles declined between 2018 and 2022, according to leanin.org and McKinsey & Company data. Nearly 1/3 of women in technical and engineering roles at work, often the only woman in the room, according to a survey of 40,000 employees in 333 organizations employing more than 12 million people. In data from Catalyst, a women's advocacy group, about 51% of women in marginalized racial and ethnic groups in the US and 4 other countries said they'd experienced racism or discrimination at their current workplace. Women with darker skin tones were far likelier to say they'd experienced racism at work. Why do we care? Every time I look at the employment data, I see how tight the job market is for technical talent. And every time we look at this data, a measurement of how businesses invest in their people, we come up short. Want to keep people? Companies have to invest. The top-line data I researched on leadership is low because of the rest of the data explored here, the lack of investment in making the workplace work for everyone. And that's why we care. There continue to be opportunities to be different. I missed this story when it came out, and thanks to listener Dustin for bringing it to me. Sophos has partnered with Cowbell Insurance, specifically sharing their security health information with Cowbell to facilitate optimal premium quotes and policies. Quote, specifically with this partnership, Sophos endpoint customers will be able to opt in to share their endpoint security health status with Cowbell from the Sophos Central platform using a new data connector. This easy-to-enable connection will streamline Cowbell's risk assessment process, allowing assessors to efficiently evaluate Sophos customers' defenses against the requirements needed for insurance policies, said Raja Patel, Senior Vice President of Products at Sophos. Besides insurance, another sector looking at using cybersecurity data is the credit bureaus. In reporting in the Washington Post, it reveals that credit rating agencies are increasingly factoring in cybersecurity as part of their credit assessment criteria as they try to get a handle on the risks companies to face. That said, investment in cyber then offsets any degradation. Why do we care? Cyber linked to your credit score is going to be impactful. More so, however, is this approach of directly collecting data on the live configuration and then having your insurance pricing depend on it. This is savvy. Minimize your risk as the insurer by ensuring the controls are in place. This is well beyond the survey style or attestation style of data collection, and it's going to change the way services companies deliver security services, which is the point. This week, Amazon opened up its Sidewalk network to third-party developers. They also released the coverage map and claim that over 90% of the US population can access the now public network. First announced in 2019, Sidewalk is a new low-power, wide-area network that Amazon believes will help enable the next wave of connected devices. It's not designed to replace cellular data for high-bandwidth devices, but to be used instead of expensive LTE or 5G connectivity on gadgets that don't need that much data, and where paying $10 or more monthly for data is excessive. And Counsel announced a partnership to bring advanced connectivity solutions to customers. The Counsel KG100S module and a portfolio of matching antennas will be fully compatible with Amazon Sidewalk. The KG100S is a low-power, cost-effective module in an LGA form factor developed primarily to support Amazon Sidewalk applications. Why do we care? There'll be a subset of listeners who will hear this story and immediately think about the kinds of solutions they can use this for and which manufacturers they need to get on board. I included Counsel as an example, knowing there are more out there. Microsoft has announced that it is rolling out ads to Microsoft Bing Chat. The company is exploring placing ads in the chat experience. Wired has a dive into the concept of violet teaming. What's that? Well, quoting the piece, identifying how a system like GPT-4 might harm an institution or public good, and then supporting the development of tools using that same system to defend the institution or public good. You can think of this as a sort of judo. General-purpose AI systems are a vast new form of power being unleashed on the world, and that power can harm our public goods. Just as judo redirects the power of an attacker in order to neutralize them, violet teaming aims to redirect the power unleashed by AI systems in order to defend those public goods. In interesting product announcements, Read AI uses OpenAI's technology to convert a 60-minute video recording into a 2-minute highlight reel. Large language models integrated with video identify the key moments from a meeting, analyzing not just the spoken words, but the reaction from participants. Similarly, Zoom has announced that they are using their AI in Zoom IQ powered assistant to help participants catch up on meetings they're late to with summarization. Europol has shared a report that criminals are using ChatGPT to commit crimes. The agency admitted that all this information is already publicly available online, that the model makes finding and understanding how to carry out specific crimes easier. Europol also highlighted that the model could be exploited to impersonate targets, facilitate fraud and phishing, or produce propaganda and disinformation to support terrorism. Unrelated, AI image generator Midjourney has halted free trials of its service, blaming an influx of new users, quote, because of massive amounts of people making throwaway accounts to get free images. On the Defender side, Microsoft has launched Microsoft Security Copilot, which looks identical to ChatGPT and focuses instead on a small set of vetted security sources. There are two intended use cases: as a chatbot to help prioritize relevant threat research and vulnerability disclosures, and as an assistant to figure out the extent of ongoing cyber incidents on networks. Currently, the new tool only pulls information from Microsoft's Threat Intelligence and Products, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and NIST's National Vulnerability Disclosure Database. Each response includes a citation to the source material. Speaking of NIST, they have launched a new AI resource center that builds upon NIST's AI resource management framework and AI playbook to support industry best practices in researching and developing socially responsible AI and machine learning systems, absent overreaching federal law. BuzzFeed spent some time with Freedom GPT, a supposed censor-free AI. It does exactly what you think it will, spewing offensive content, as you might expect. Why do we care? I've mentioned the different models and understanding their uses as a new skill for providers. Well, here's an example of why. Many companies and customers will want to know the protections to avoid getting into trouble, as limiting that exposure is required. Shocking no one, criminals are using it too, and companies like Midjourney are discovering the downsides of opening up to anybody. NIST, of course, now gives you the resources to be that consultant. Are Violet teams part of that solution? I'm not sure, but I offer the concept for consideration. Microsoft too, with a helpful entry into the defensive category. I also want to comment on pieces I've seen recently about cybersecurity and ChatGPT, with experts focusing on how the platform can generate code that's vulnerable to exploits. That's true, and so do humans. So saying it should be thoroughly vetted, inspected, and tested, yeah, code should. So should human-written code. That's just fear-mongering. Which leads to tactical ideas. The flurry of useful products continues. ConnectWise has partnered with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency's Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative to enhance cybersecurity for MSPs. Through this partnership, ConnectWise will have access to the latest threat intelligence, best practices, and training material from CISA's JCDC. ConnectWise can share this information with MSPs to support ongoing efforts to defend against evolving cyber attacks. Also, a heads up from CrowdStrike that North Korea-linked hackers are actively attaching malware to the Windows and macOS versions of 3CX's video conferencing tool. Customers should uninstall the app from their devices and avoid using it unless necessary. The company is expected to have a rebuilt app available soon. Why do we care? Second story was shared with me by listener Tom as something of interest to other providers, mainly based on the reach of the product. It's important and super blocking and tackling. The first story I noted because while called a partnership, it's more that ConnectWise is a consumer of that information and will share that with its customers. It's a smart move, yet also a necessary one. Consuming that much information and simplifying it is hard, and if a vendor can do that work and offer it to customers, that's of value. It's a rare with government partnership of note, and frankly, I want to see more of this public-private type partnership. Thanks for watching this week in the Business of Tech. If you like this video, you can let me know with a like of the video, and even more valuable, hitting the subscription button. My content is all free, and I use metrics like subscriptions to pay the bills, so it has real value. The content here is produced under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you're interested in more content like this, you can get access to content early via our Patreon at patreon.com/MSPradio. It's our give what you want model, where you set the value of what you think the content is worth. If you like this show, you can catch it daily as the 5-minute news and commentary podcast, The Business of Tech, available on all your favorite podcatchers, with links at businessof.tech. Just hit that big blue subscribe button. Again, thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen, and I really value the interaction. If you want to say something in the comments, I do respond and watch all of them, and I look forward to talking to you next time.